Now we're live. Hello! I hope you can all hear us all. Welcome to the October Designer Chat, the spooky edition.
Yeah.
I should have put a ghost up or something. We have
scary
we have spooky decorations. My partner showed me we have like 5 panels on our porch, like porch windows, and we're going to make like a ghost comic using Halloween.
Out of all the panels?
Yeah, Halloween decorations. It just kind of like divides like a comic strip.
Nice.
They're like weirdly squarish.
I'm deciding how scary I want our house to be, which is like a whole. Like I think I want to be the house that's like too scary to go up to. Somebody needs to be. Nick got the fit though. Not wrong.
It's true. There's like a sort of infamous like part of, I think it's part of St. Clair in St. Paul, where I don't know if they close the street off for Halloween, but like everybody on that street goes really hard.
And just a big does it up.
And apparently when you like, it's happened more than a few times, if you buy a house on that street, they're like, the Halloween decorations are in the basement. You kind of can't get rid of
It's like
those.
kind of you have
to
set it all up.
You're now part of a generational...
Part of the spooky street.
A generational thing.
How's everybody doing though? It seems like oh man, Patrick, I want to be fully sized candy bars, whatever I do. Yeah, that's you gotta be the fun house, giving out candy if anything. Assuming things are normal this year.
My kids went up to a house like that did full size candy bars, and they like each got a Hershey's bar, and they were like, "Do we get 2?" Because they had just gotten like 2 minis, and the guy who's hanging out looked so incredulous. I was like, "Are you kidding me? I want to be the house."
The boldness.
And my children don't really understand anything outside of quantity.
It's just about the number. I should be getting more.
Well, hello everybody. So we're talking about design stuff today. This is like going to be a little unstructured. We have one announcement, which is which I can get right at the top of the hour, which is that Fort and Cats and Dogs is now retail released.
Yeah.
Look at that little guy. So many retail stores now have it, and if you pre-ordered it with us, you should have already gotten your copy, most certainly. And it's great. I was reminded of how good it was when we played it last Friday. And Andrea from customer service destroyed me.
Oh, yeah?
Were you in that game?
No, I wasn't.
No, you were playing
I was playing
okay, so there's no...
Run, don't walk, or whatever.
Oh my
Go get your Fort Cats and Dogs.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know how many we printed. You should, I mean...
No idea.
No,
Buy them.
I don't have to know that anymore. It's nice. As with most of our stuff, if you're interested in it, go get it, because it'll go out of stock, and then we'll put it back in stock and whatnot. But it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah.
It takes Fort. For me, it's like Fort goes from like an 8.5, 9 to like a 9.5, 10.
Yep. It's one of the expansions that it's my favorite type, where it's like changes the game like 25%. Not a ton. Most of the stuff stays the same. A little bit of adjustment that'll change how you plan and what you go for, but I'm super happy with how it came out. It's the it's the most it's the smallest project I've ever worked on here, and the most surgical, I'd say.
It was like weird when it was done. It felt like it was done so quickly.
Yeah, we hung out on it for a little while.
Yep.
It was, files were ready to go.
Yeah, well, one of the first instances of the studio like finishing a project and kind of like putting it in the bank. When the schedule, the time's right, we'll release it.
We'll get it out.
So I want to talk about things we've been playing and doing before we get into studio stuff. I played a mountain of board games this weekend.
What did you go to?
I played Taj Mahal a bunch, which was a game that I think I hated. And it's a Knizia game, but I think like Ra was the game you had the reversal on, right?
Yeah, Ra is awesome. And I didn't like it originally.
Right, and so Taj Mahal...
First time I played Ra, I wasn't into it.
Yeah, Taj Mahal, the same thing happened to me. I was like, first play, I was like, I think this is the worst design game I've ever played.
Sure.
And then it just kind of stuck in my brain, and every time I've gone back to it, I'm like, no, this game is actually good. I'll bring it in. Because it's like...
Was it designed by?
It's a Knizia game, but it's like Knizia's like trick-takey poker with a board kind of vibe. It's really cool. So I played a lot of that. Played 1882, which was... trains. It was good.
Trains though.
It was good trains. It was like trains, like high stress trains. Like sometimes with the 18xx games, you can play badly, but you're never too worried because you're like,
sure.
I guess my score will be low. And this one was like, you felt like if you made a wrong mistake, you're gonna lose. and it had because it.
How many people do you usually get for those?
Like you can play 3 to 5 players. This plays 4.
Now, how many do you personally usually get to play your 1880 X?
Wait. What do you mean? Like
what's your group? 3 people? 4 people?
I usually play with 4.
4 additional people?
No, like 4.
3 total.
Yeah,
3 others.
No,
I was curious how many people.
4, yeah, some of them play 5. The problem is if one person is a little slower than the rest of the group, you can really
drag them.
No, but I've got a little faster group.
Dealing with a lot of money, you know.
Deal with it's like one of those games where it's like, well, it's going to take 3
one.
seconds per exchange, but there's 200 cash exchanges.
Yeah, per moment.
That's
hilarious.
But yeah, 1882 is crazy because it always ends in a player bankruptcy. So it's basically like playing hot potato, the economic game, where you're like, which one of us is going to be holding the hot potato, and you're juggling things around.
That makes sense.
It's I think it also has like a lot of personality. There's like a war that breaks out in the game that destroys part of the map.
Sure.
I don't know.
I want to clarify about my 4 additional people. It was about the. I just didn't know that there were that many people who played those games. So I thought he was just calling his wife normally or something.
No, only us.
No, that's my mistake.
Twin Cities is a huge 18xx community. All Aboard Games, the publisher of many fine games, Scott Peterson, he is based in Minneapolis. And his group I've never played with, but apparently they play really fast because obviously they're like testing these games.
Sure.
So it's like if you can't keep up,
there's just no point.
Yeah, they don't invite you back.
That's fine. I started playing. I played Under Falling Skies. I started the solo one. As I talk, none of us in the office would say we're solo gamers much, myself included. But I would feel like I need to try to. I'm particularly, with a dice rolling and placing game specific spots. I only felt the call of the void of should I be playing a solo board game once during the whole thing? And it was really good. I have nothing but good things to say about Under Falling Skies.
Is it? I got kind of a Space Invaders vibe.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Not all it is. Not all it is. Thematically, that's all it is. Aliens are coming down and you need to blast them away. But it's really good. It's a really good Yahtzee game. Yahtzee style. You're deciding where you're going to put your dice and how. And the thing I'm curious about when I tested myself though was after I did the first 2 campaign things or whatever, the tutorial, I made myself pack it back up and put it away because I know if I kept this out on the table, this almost feels like a free pass of it getting played again.
Sure.
And I love that. No. I was I would need to see is this actually when my evening settles and I have something to do, am I going to okay, let's open this box of stuff again and do that all? Because that's what always stops me from solo gaming is how much stuff, but it's a really quick setup and whatnot, so I was pretty into it.
We also did, and let me know about the audio. The speaker is right between us, so we should be kind of the same, but if I'm looking at my hands while I'm talking, you're not going to hear me as well.
Nick's louder than Cole. That's just normal, unfortunately.
I'm trying. We played Concordia again. This is game 6 of Concordia in the past 2 weeks, which has been really fun to kind of drill deep, although the folks I've been playing with, I think we've fallen into a goofy meta where I don't know if we're bad at the game. Our scores are very low. When I compare notes to other Concordia players, our scores are 120 is a slam dunk winning score, and I think it's because we are aggressively rushing the game.
Sure, you're not taking your time. You're not getting all the points you could maybe.
I think players you just have a lot of ability to rush the game, and usually what happens is I'll feel like I'm getting a slight edge, or whoever's getting a slight edge will just absolutely put the gas on and just drive the game over the cliff. And it's been really interesting. I think it's a great game. Super clean. I'll bring it into the office. It seems like I think you dig. I think you dig it.
I'd be down.
Especially, did you like FAM? Did you play?
That's the one with the crocodiles,
the alligators.
FAM was interesting.
Okay,
was interesting. It was interesting. I don't know. I'm still the jury's out on my opinion about Euros in general. That the discussion that we had. No, the discussion that we had. Here's a good take. Was that I think currently what I understood when I was looking at it is that the definition of Euros too big. I didn't like when I looked at the category of what games were included. I was like, oh, I definitely like some of these, but some others I definitely don't. And I think it's a really broad category right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it actually there's at least 3 design traditions. There's the Knizia older stuff.
Yeah.
Then there's the Concordia mid-period stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's the Lasarda stuff.
Yeah.
And they're all you're right, they're totally different types of games.
But they all are euros, and that's why sometimes when people you want to play,
something medieval merchant. Whatever.
Yeah, is it named after a city? Is usually my go-to.
Hamburg. Is also by Garrett's. I also played on. There's only a lot of games this weekend. Played Unfathomable.
Oh yeah.
Which I think we're going to play more in the office hopefully this week. Which I will say is just better than BSG. Just like flat.
That's good. It's good to hear at least.
Well,
when
BSG
the
had
remake
fallen
does
into
what it's
that,
supposed
like,
to.
Fantasy Flight games of that period, there were just, like, too many optional weird rules. So whenever you would sit down and play with people, they're like, oh, we play with, like, these 2 variants and, like, these 3 half expansions or whatever, right? They, they cobble their, like, ideal BSG
the actual way they want to play.
Experience. And I just thought Unfathomable was, like, it's a little simpler, but just better.
Because it just is what it is kind of thing.
Yeah. It knows what it is. I thought it was really well done. I was impressed, and I'm, like, an FFG skeptic, but...
Sure. That's
the best thing they've done recently. All right. Look at that.
Oh, the other here, I'll give the I read, as I told everybody, I read all of the rules for the Root RPG this weekend. I had the PDFs from the. This is
I don't know how you got it.
Yeah, they're gonna prove this is what this is nothing's out there. But I read through the rules as we have them currently or whatever. Very cool. I'm excited for people who play RPGs. I don't really, but I was like, oh, I feel like I could run this now, which I think is I don't know. More stuff to be excited about, y'all. Root RPG seems very cool. As my first brush of a person who doesn't really play them, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's just wild to see like such an extended riff. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it. It's like someone made the sequel to Root.
Yeah. There's just so much there. Yeah, there's a lot of it was 8 hours of reading. I think one day where I just sat down and just was like, because I've never done any of it, so I need to know what it even meant to like tell people how to play an RPG. Anyway.
Yeah. Is that a thing? Yes. Root RPG is a thing. I don't think you can back it anymore. But
no,
I've been wrong about stuff like that before.
No, if you go to their Magpie Games website, there's a coming soon about it that you can look at or get more info.
And it's interestingly about the Root RPG for people who've played other RPGs is it's not a 5e module.
Nope.
It is its own thing based on Powered by the Apocalypse. Yep. So it's like it is a cool RPG. It is different. If you've only played Dungeons and Dragons, this is like a whole other thing.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I'll say if you've never run one, as a person who never had either, the materials felt like they set me up to be able to do so, which is I think very of note.
Yeah.
I felt by the end of it I was like, okay, sure, I've never done this. I feel like I can now. So
yeah, there's like a funny. I mean, from the perspective of like if we were writing RPGs, it's weird that every RPG includes a section that's like, so
do you know the rules about this other one?
Do you know what an RPG is?
Yeah.
I mean, as if like I guess this is the rule that's like put the board in the center of the table, like kind of the stuff we assume about how board games work. I was I watched a video about the Royal Game of Ur, this like ancient Babylonian board game.
Oh yeah.
And we have a rule book for it, but the rule book is like incomprehensible because if you've ever like looked at like a cribbage rule book or like a hearts rule book, you're like, well, this kind of assumes I know a lot about card games
or trick taking. Sure.
So like coming at like 2,000 years without context, like does this rule book mean anything? And I feel like board games make a lot of assumptions about the rules, and RPGs are maybe a little bit better about being like, hey, is this your first thing? We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into games. Studio is starting to get busy, I think is like...
Yeah, I'm in a weird amount of work.
Yeah, I mean, would you call yourself busy?
Would I call that's what's that? Would you call myself busy? My mind is always occupied with the problem I'm dealing with right now, so it feels busy, but there's nothing to really do about it yet. so there's like a middle ground of how much thought versus how much work. But we're in the part where I'm at the development phase with Ahoy, where. It's one of the harder parts of the process, but also one of the best benefits of our studio, I think, where I always talk about it like a slow, like a crystallization, right? Like things kind of start to grow at some point once we put something truly into line. At that moment, some things will start to solidify. And with Ahoy, we're at the part where the game's getting more solid and stuff like that, but now it's about a lot of the like physical things where sometimes I think it's interesting how a different studio would be given a game with a design and be like, okay, there's 20 markers, there's a board, there's a blah, blah, blah. And then all that, now you can just be like, okay, now lay that out. lay out X material. But because the game is being developed while we're finishing layout and while Kyle's doing art, we kind of simultaneously are landing all three of these things where it's like, if we can lighten that rule, we can save some text space here, which means we can make the icon bigger. And it's like it's where every part is kind of very important to be considering. And so it's hard to make choices because any moment a solid choice in one direction of like, I think the player boards are this size. You don't want to lose the freedom of being able to make it bigger if it means it's better, but you do also need to make some choices to get the thing done in.
So like a very concrete example of that, which is something that literally I just sent Kyle a message about like an hour ago, the box size. So currently, we don't know what size the Ahoy box is going to be.
Yes.
We just don't know.
That's like a fundamental.
Yeah, we're like waiting on quotes from the factory. We're waiting on like our retail strategy. There's like a lot of.
And truly, we're also just waiting to decide ourselves a bit.
Yeah,
half of it's just us being like, I don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, do you want like a fort-sized box that's like twice as thick?
Yeah.
Do you want like a river folk-sized box? Do we want to do a total? Do you want to make a square box? We have a lot of options, and we can hem and haw about that, but we can't decide like the size of a player board or the size of a rule book,
right?
Until we know for sure what size the box is. And so we're just in this like very funny like holding pattern where there's just a few outstanding questions, and then pretty soon we have the meeting where we just pick something.
Yep.
And then
it's now then we're just hitting sizes and doing that. But yeah, it's been it's going well. Kyle's been doing a bunch of art lately. The world's coming together really well. He's been coming up with like the style of it all. We were just talking about Kyle's asking me about the logo for Ahoy and what kind of stuff we want to do. I realized I was going to send this message to you, Kyle, before I almost missed getting to this stream. It's hard to find a wide variety of nautical stuff. Everything's a rope and an anchor and a lighthouse. And I was like, well, you could draw those three things, Kyle. But a Google search shows that's the nautical logo. Yeah. So it's much like all of our other stuff we have. It's not just a pirate game with people and guns and cannons. It has like that Kyle flavor of animals and whatnot. So just figuring out like what does that then translate to a graphic style when all of the old graphic styling is based around people with beards and rifles and stuff.
And what I'm realizing is that like with Oath and Root have like fundamentally like typographic style. It's like what type of font, and like I remember Kyle and I talking about like I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a specific type of script that the Oath like mark is based on. But Fort has like a graphical.
Yeah, it has like a
style. Yeah, like a logo. I don't know. And I've always imagined Ahoy also having one.
Yeah,
like a much more illustrated
thing.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. Anyway, this like where we're at with Ahoy is really interesting because like the design is almost done. There's still some like little outstanding questions, but it's cooking along, and it like hasn't quite gone up to full speed because of those outstanding questions.
Yeah.
But over the past several months at the studio, we've been in kind of like a slow period. It's been really nice because we've just been kind of ruminating about the next few years and kind of setting a strategy that's going to inform what we're going to be doing like, this winter, next winter, the following summer, all, the whole thing. And I think we have finally started coming to that strategy, and now the work, at least my work, especially this past few weeks, has been like everything that's not the active project needs to be put away. So I was like noodling on like a weird deduction game. I'm like, put it away. I like can't work on it now. Like that stuff, we'll revisit those notes later.
Yeah. And
then just starting to like clean up my files so that more than one person can work in them and like, prepare for the actual like work.
Yeah, I mean that's actually been a big one I'm doing lately is preparing my files for. When you're in layout at this point, you have a bunch of assets that none of them are going to make it to the end. So you still want to like handle those assets responsibly in files and naming and whatnot, but also at the end of the day these will all be killed and deleted and replaced. So I'm like creating the homes for what I know will come eventually as the replacement for all these assets when we get Kyle art or icons and stuff like that. And it's really interesting, but it's also I think it's why we're so lucky. I mean, I'm at the part where I get to I get to take a lot of time to make a lot of choices about what maybe seem like small things in the game, but it's the care that we're allowed to put into the process at this point. I mean, me and Josh can, our rules editor can, we can talk layout and rules simultaneously while we're figuring out something.
And we have time because the way Ahoy's release, like, it could be like a next year Gen Con thing potentially, and so for that reason, like, we've got a little bit of time on the schedule.
Yeah.
And, I'm not like, it doesn't feel rushed. For those that mentioned in the chat, no cube boxes. Cube boxes are dumb and bad.
Oh,
they're just dumb and bad. Don't like them. You can't put it in a bag, or if you do put it in a bag, you can't take it then out of the bag. Like,
here's a good this would be a good question, is to have everybody, what's their biggest game they own box wise, and then when is the last time you played it?
Oh God!
Right, that'd be a good like, it's time to pull out some closets, because I'm like, mine would be Millennium Blades.
Sure.
The big one, and yeah, I mean, I haven't played that game in over 6 months at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel it was like pre-pandemic. I don't even know anymore.
There was a line in Quinn's review of Descent that like really resonated with me, where he talked about how he felt like a video game character carrying like a block. Whenever he was like walking with, which
there are certain boxes that put you that way.
I carry a lot of goofy looking boxes from my car to my home when I get back from work, and I have never felt so like self-conscious as when I was carrying that Descent box. It's just a lot. It's a lot. The goofiest box, I do own like a tube game, like a game that's in like a
the cylinder.
Bin Fa, which is a weird abstract. It's a great game, but it's an unhelpful shape. It just always sits next to the game shelf.
I see a few people in the chat also have the massive ogre box that we have in office.
Yeah,
we have one of those in office. I've only seen it.
When I too have massive ogre, but I broke mine into plastic tubs. My ogre is in 3 little
Tupperwares.
Yeah, essentially 3 Tupperwares.
That's
because that box, I'm like, this box is designed for somebody who like lives in the burbs with a massive basement.
You say Tupperware again?
Tupperware.
We'll get into that difference.
Norsound, yes, I've got Bin Fa. My copy of Bin Fa, I bought when I was in high school, and I sent a money order to Ken Hodgkins, I think that's his name. At his, I think he like lived in New Hampshire. I just remember writing like a letter to someone living in New Hampshire.
That was how you got
with the money, and then he shipped it to me.
Did you just hoping you get money getting a game back? You're like, this is the best way I can get it.
This is the internet, right?
That's funny.
Okay, what else are we working on? We're working on Marauder stuff, Marauder update. It's in production.
Yep.
The Marauder update for the next 2 months, 3 months,
It's probably that.
will be the exact same update that I just gave you. It's done. They're working on it. We will probably get I'm hoping that we get an NPC sometime in December. So like there's a world that our December designer chat, we do like second or third week into the month if we get an NPC.
Sure.
And that's the manufactured production copy, which is is that what that stands for?
That's what we say it stands for, at least. Mass production copy.
That's it.
Mass, not manufactured.
I knew I had messed up something. The address finalization date, Brooke or someone in chat will know that.
Probably hit you with that. Yeah.
I don't know. We usually don't do address lock until it's on the boat, but I don't know. That's maybe not right. You know what else we played that I wanted to mention? Mm-hmm. Speaking of bad and good boxes.
What do you got?
How do you rate the box for Fuzzies?
Oh, Fuzzies is like the best packaging in a long time. Yeah. I forgot I've been playing that recently. Yeah, the little...
It looks like a lamp.
The little stacking game with the fuzzies in it. I don't know what else to call it. That game is for shelf space. So it's interesting that you said that, because somebody else talked about a cone game that was bad for shelf space, and I would agree that Fuzzies is technically probably bad for shelf, but it's so small it doesn't matter. It exists in that. Yeah, I was gonna say it exists in that. It's like appealing with the like semi-transparent plastic. Yeah, that company has production design is through the roof. They know what they're doing for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a conversation piece put on top for sure. Agreed.
And then, let's see, I'm going through the projects.
I'm just considering having a domed box so that everything else just slides off of it. You can never... It's not even like fully coned, but it's just like a 30 degree concave.
Kyle told me this interesting factoid. I had no idea. That was the treasure chests like the curved roof of the treasure chest, and so people don't put stuff on top of it.
You did tell me, yes, yeah, that
Amazing.
was for Kyle, yeah.
I love that detail.
Like expensive luggage, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you should get that kind of chest for Catan. Or not for Catan.
For
like the old Catan, there was like the $300 Catan
yeah,
from
get the Ahoy.
10 years ago. It was a treasure chest.
The unstackable Ahoy for $300.
Perfect. Because people want it to be more irritating for more money. Right? And then I'm working with, I talked a lot about ARCS, which I'm happy to answer questions about. What I will say about ARCS before getting to any specific questions is that I have a general rule that like about 6 months before like we really get into the weeds for a project, I want to start like talking about it. And what had happened was I kept finding myself like answering the same small question about ARCS in every like press that I did. Yeah. And so I was like, well, let's just put it all in one place.
Totally.
And then I didn't expect it to end up on Polygon in 10 minutes.
It's easier that way.
Yeah,
sometimes it's easier that way. Now you just link them that article.
But it is, I'm now like, I'm pretty convinced that it's going to work. Like, you know, it always had this, that project always had this like funny shape where it was like, this is kind of interesting idea. Mm-hmm. There's a non-zero chance it just can't work. It like, you know, it just won't generate enough lift. But I think it will work.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I agree and I disagree. I'm like the concept as a whole, yes, but I think I think you could can the thing and keep the core like action system.
Oh, sure,
and put it on. Yeah. And put that spice on anything, and it'd be pretty good. Yeah, it's like a weird combination of like how both done it is and not done. Yeah, I agree with that. I think like Patrick made a comment. I was listening to an interview Patrick did where he said that like ARCS is as done as Root was when we kickstarted Root. That's fairish, yeah. Yeah, which I think is like probably pretty close. Well, I think certain things about Root were a little further along. What I was going to say is it's more playable than a lot of versions of Oath were this early. Oh yeah, 100%. That's what I think. Like, it's because the core play is much less disruptive than Oath's. Yes. Oath's core play is often disruptive and I don't know. Yeah, there's completely different in that core, like how you interface with the system moment to moment. It's weird to. This is the first time I ever worked on a game where the action system came first, and I'm like, oh, I want to keep that, and then I have to be careful not to break it while working on it. So it's in some way like more of a traditional design. It is so nice, and I know that I feel like you beat me to the punch here, Nick. But working on games that are simple. Oh sure, it's great. It's interesting. It's lovely. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just a change of pace. I mean, it's like you have to think about stuff differently, which I will say is also why it's sometimes hard because the standards of certain things are different across different price ranges of games, different depths of games, expectations change with that, and what I'm learning is becoming a professional in the industry how it's how much you need to be able to shift that lens easily. Mm-hmm. When going between projects, because sometimes it's just the same concerns I have about a Root expansion, for example, aren't the same considerations I need to have about a Ford expansion or about Ahoy or something. There's just different liabilities. Yep, and like I think it's so interesting working in Root because like in some ways Root is like the simplest place to work because all the rules have already been set. Right. When you work on a Root project, you make the least number of decisions, but your decisions weigh so much. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And whereas, like when we were working on Oath cards, we could do anything. I mean, like moment to moment. The moment to moment felt like, well, we could design any kind of card. Put any card in here. Yeah, any kind of card is going to work in this game. It's interesting when you put it that way. Ryan, the only unfathomable take I have for you is that Drew and I would betray you again if given an opportunity. And then someone asked, ARCS, if it is a roguelike, how does it end the campaign? Does someone win? Can everyone lose? Break that question into two parts. So in terms of the roguiness of ARCS, I'm like trying to find the right way to talk about this because what I found is like, okay, so rogue folks, people who are into rogue games are super prickly about definitions. Yeah, I was going to say, I'd be careful with that term. I personally would be careful with that term surrounding ARCS. Oath is more roguey than ARCS is, in my opinion. But these terms are also... Yeah, but like it's like hard. What do these terms mean? Yeah, and also like, can any rogue, like or light, be a multiplayer game? That's like almost like the more fundamental element is like,
is this fundamentally a PvE? And so I'm like, well, let's just sidestep that and like, can you apply design lessons, techniques from rogues into a competitive play space? So I always think about, I late in Oath's development, I started thinking Oath is kind of a roguelike in the sense that it's a political roguelike where you're doing a run. The world of the game is being procedurally generated. It's just procedurally generated by the previous plays. And then critically, in the philosophy of item design, all the items are, like, they aren't better or worse than one another intrinsically. Like, there's no +1 sword versus +2 sword. They're just different depending on context. And then the last element that's important is a lot of rogues, they present all of the complexity at the very beginning. So like a very skilled Spelunky player or Angband player or Adon player has all the same actions that like a very new player has. It's just how do you want to use them. And so like Oath doesn't gatekeep its complexities. It's like, nope, start of the game, you have all the tricks. And it's not like you're going to unlock your 4th action at the 5th round of the game or something like that. And so ARCS, some of that is being kept, especially in like the way I want some of the card design to work. But the runs are like weirdly both longer and shorter because like a run is the full campaign potentially. But the actual games are faster. I don't know. I'm still sort of sorting through it. And then the question about the end of the campaign and all lose conditions, ARCS. It's possible, I guess, to write an all-lose condition. I think usually they don't work in game design. Like fail conditions often just don't work because it's too easy for one player to torpedo the game. I'm trying to think about a game that has an all-fail condition that I feel like is good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like at the end, you'd have to be pulling something pretty fancy off to play. For me personally, to play for like 3-4 hours of a game and then like nobody, the game won.
Yeah, actually, the game. To me, it doesn't have a good.
Well, and I think at least that's because in its current version of ARCS, it is still so competitively focused that losing to the game doesn't have any meaningful satisfaction to it. At least how it's currently presented.
And the way the victory conditions work in ARCS is every game you're going to be generating victory points, essentially, and then at the end of the game you can cash those in for different like upgrades and things. So you can spend them in a kind of like the way the way rogues work. That's a very rogue.
No, that's what I said. Yeah, for sure.
You know, like Dead Cells or.
I always the way I think
Legacy.
Of ARCS, it's like there's like a meta currency almost. Is the best way to think about it. Yeah. It's like throughout the game you'll play the game and you'll score these things, but you'll also gain a meta currency that then you can spend to deepen your position in the next game or to.
And then the thinking is at the end of the 4th game, whoever can just acquire the most of that currency in a single game will have like the default victory condition. But what makes the game interesting is that at the very start of the game, players get these, essentially they're called fate cards right now, but they're just going to be these like plot lines basically. And when you look at your plot line, it might say like, oh, like you want to build the Library of Babel, you want to be the Galactic Librarian. I don't know why I always lead with that one. But
you like books.
I like books.
You like books.
Guilty. But on that card, it will give you a thing that you need to try to do in the game. And if you can complete it, it will unlock new goals, new technologies, new counter goals that other people can be used to play against you. But at the bottom of that card, it will tell you how many steps in that plot line you are from an alternate victory condition. So the idea is when you get to that final game, one player might just be playing to win on the meta currency, but everybody else is going to have at least one other victory condition that they're trying to achieve. And this mechanism is really a reaction to thinking about Oath and the parsing problem of like the PAX games, where oftentimes there are like 8 victory conditions always in play, and it's really hard to like look at the board and see everything and see what's going on. And so this kind of like slowly introduces players to those kinds of situations without it being like such a game of so tactical, right? Like sometimes especially when I play like PAX Viking or PAX Renaissance, the victory conditions can feel very, very tactical because someone's like about to win and you go smack them on the wrist. I think Oath moved a little bit away from that because you can be a little bit more defensive in Oath compared to those games, and this game moves even kind of more towards the strategic, hopefully.
Yeah, it's interesting. For even more win conditions than Oath.
Even more. There are so many. Well, okay, so then
That's a
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, as you say, it's an interesting way when you think about it like that, because I mean, it depends on what you consider a victory condition. I guess actually, like, because game to game, in ARCS, you're going to be presented with, at least again in current versions, all that, you're going to be presented with less victory conditions than you will in a game of Oath by a huge margin, and you're like, you're sitting down to play ARCS, not as many ways to win as you were in Oath. Oath is like, yep, all the vision, the usurper, all of these things.
Yeah.
And this says what can we do if we direct players towards goals and then make them fight over what they've won, or something a little bit more directly, which I think is interesting. It's a lot more. It's a lot more story driven, I guess.
Yeah,
it's a lot more just like
it is like a little. I mean,
story-driven.
I started using the comparison, I don't know if this is a good comparison, but I'm testing it, right? I mean, part of what someone asked me yesterday, why would you go have a big Twitter thread without like a Kickstarter link? And I said, well, like part of what I want to do in a Twitter thread like that is see like what's resonating with people and what people are being like put off by.
Sure.
And so one of the things that I'm thinking through is the idea that like Oath is like narrative Legos.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Oath is like narrative Legos, which is to say like very small pieces you can use to build all sorts of different things, ARCS, and I mean this affectionately, is like Duplos with more pre-built sets.
Sure.
It's like either you can think about that as more Duplos, or you can think about it as it's like a big box of Legos circa 2010 versus circa 1990.
Sure.
Right? Like you got a lot more like pre-built elements.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it true that like you might be able to recognize the outline of an X-Wing in that cool ship you just built? Well, yeah, it doesn't mean that like you only had to build the X-Wing.
Right.
Again, I'm talking about Legos. I'm not talking about Star Wars. Legos. Staying on topic.
Immediately, stream taken down by the mouse.
We've been caught. So that's and it's been interesting to see what has been exciting people and what's been kind of turning them off. One interesting place in that is that I'm trying to work with a really restricted player count. Like the game is very much designed for 3 or 4 players only, and there's a world where I could see it maybe working with 2, but more likely not, and definitely not 1. And I think it'd probably, I don't know if I'd like it with 4 or 5. I think it'd be like, there's almost no world where 5 would be more interesting than 4. Because of the amount of information that players are having to parse. Like if you think about the number of cards in an Oath game is principally fixed by the number of sites and their capacities. And the plus or minus 3 advisors is not a big deal. Like the majority of cards are in play. So as you scale up players, it doesn't really change the amount of information that's in play that much. I mean, obviously it changes it a little bit. With ARCS, it does. And so you don't really want like 6 players in a game of ARCS.
Well, it's interesting because ARCS, when you talk about it in that way, like Oath says you all have the same actions, but how do you want to use them? Cool. You can use them however you want, whether that's getting secrets or getting a favor. I can use those actions however I want. Maybe I don't even... To one of your points, one of the big things in Oath, and it actually happened in our game on Friday, was you can win a game of Oath without taking one of the actions.
Sure.
And Cole, you'll be happy. Actually, Clay almost did it wwithout traveling on Friday.
That's
like
one of my favorite.
Yeah, he almost won without traveling on Friday, but
Good
he
job,
didn't.
Clay.
But he didn't. Because there isn't competition within the action structure, there's competition over the things in the game. While ARCS, to me right now, the most interesting thing is the competition within the action structure.
Yeah.
It is far less about competition. I can take control of the actions of the table in a way that you can't in Oath or something. By the means of doing so is by controlling your position to a point that's so high, and increasing your own. And they're very different in that way.
There's this. There's a way in which ARCS, like, almost goes back to pre-Root and thinking really fundamentally about like what are the problems of asymmetry in games. So like, Root was a reaction to Vast, and so things like Patrick was very clear that he said, okay, we want to make sure that Root has a victory point track in it. Because one of the problems with Vast is that it's hard to see who's winning sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And so, let's put a victory condition on it, or a victory track. And then Root one of the things that was very important in the design is like making sure that everybody like kind of moved the same way and kind of fought the same way. And that was because sometimes when you play a game of VAS, and I love VAS, but sometimes it feels like you're playing different games, especially when you're teaching the game. And so Root was one way of trying to figure out that asymmetry and do it a little differently. And I think ARCS like goes back to that kind of like lower part of the tree and says like, let's do a branch in a different direction. And I think what it's doing is two things. One, it is introducing the complexity slowly. So that when you start a game of ARCS, everybody's pretty much at the same level of asymmetry. When you finish the game of ARCS, you are at a vast or even greater than vast level of asymmetry, ideally. And because that asymmetry was emergent, it can feel organic, it can feel player-driven, but it also like gets players used to the idea that like, hey, your whole team, you don't even have buildings, but you built into that position, or like you don't fight. But you also like gradually got those improvements and finished those plot points to put you in that spot.
Yeah. So
that's like one thing that ARCS is doing. And then the second thing that ARCS is doing is with the action structure. Because in a game where all the players grow to these asymmetric positions that are so divergent they don't have any commonality, you need an action structure that is deeply interactive to have everyone like talking the same language. Right? Because otherwise we're all just like playing our own mini game. And there are some, it's interesting, especially in the world following Root, there have been some interesting asymmetric strategy games that have come out that are, it's almost like everyone's playing like their own little game. And there's very little attention played to like the core of the, you know, not the core, but let's call it the board, or the shared space. And so ARCS uses this like impulse, lead, follow action system where if you have the initiative, you can really like set the beat of the game and be like, I've got the initiative and we're fighting and moving right now because that's kind of what I want to do. And you can play off and take your little bits of production, your little bits of building. But if you get your bicycle behind me and draft off of me, you're going to be able to also take a lot of actions and really work in those areas. And so it feels like a race in the way that trick-taking games sometimes feel like races through a hand. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. How emergent is ARCS?
I don't know what that means. How emergent is ARCS? Like it's a little bit less than Oath, but Oath is crazy.
See, it's
wide.
I'll be the counter and say like it depends on what you mean by emergent, right?
Okay,
like I don't know. If emergent to you is literally something notable being presented to you, like, then I'd say ARCS is more emergent, because ARCS's point almost is to say like, hey, something's happening. Yeah. The thing I've thought about is like where a story in Oath might be like, oh, you went out somewhere, you searched, and you got the assassin, and what that meant in the game was like you went out, you took an action, you now have an assassin advisor. ARCS's point more is to say like, you played a game, you did things, got in bed with the assassins, and now at the end of the game, you have assassins.
Yes.
And you will be able to weaponize assassins in the future for until you lose those assassins by another means. So in that way, I think it is like a lot. It's a lot chunkier. I mean, like things happen much quicker in that way.
Yeah, and if you think about like an Oath, the little booklet is so useful in Oath because it asks the players to like tell the story. Where you're like, okay, all these things happen in the game.
What does that mean?
I'm going to stitch them into a story.
Yeah.
And the game is doing work there too, but the work it's doing is like pretty invisible. It's like up to the Oath needs to speak through its players, and ARCS doesn't. ARCS is a lot more like a narrative game in terms of it, like, you know, kind of more manicuring things. Yep. So like that can make it both kind of less or more emergent depending on how you want to read it. One thing I think that's really special about ARCS, this is another comment I saw, which was like, why is this game a campaign game? Which is a great question, and it's a question that I asked myself a lot while working on it, because I thought like, am I just bloating a 2-hour strategy game into a 4-hour strategy game? Or should this actually just be a 3-hour strategy game? Or should I cut all this stuff out and just make it like a 60-minute game, which is like kind of where the market wants it. But the reason why I like doing it as a kind of what I'm calling like a micro campaign or a short campaign game is that what I found was, if we're talking about change in game state, like let's say you want to tell a game where your character like learns magic or something, like becomes a Jedi, whatever. In a traditional 4X game, you're having to slowly unlock techs, but new technologies and abilities, but they can't be super dramatic, because if you get a power that's like wild in the middle of the game, you have to tell everybody to stop doing what they're doing so you can just read your power, right? So you're always, in design for a lot of these games, you're always, in thematic games, you're always trying to make sure the powers are like pretty small or like easily put in capsules. Like, and Oath is super conscious about this, because all of Oath's templating for the cards is such that wildly different powers in the cards are like 3 lines of text or 4 lines of text. And in ARCS says that, like, hey, between sessions, between episodes, when you're kind of resetting the game and you're spending your meta currency, you can unlock whole modules of rules that didn't exist previously, because it's this like natural break. So that you say, like, even if you're playing through the whole campaign in one sitting, you can say, like, okay, hey, I just unlocked my like generation ship. Everybody, here are the 3 rules that are gonna like change how I'm playing, and I know how this works. And then you go into the next game with like this one new thing that you're kind of introducing to the story.
Yeah, I think the other thing that ARCS is fate system, which is, I think, one of the big things I'm realizing that makes it so distinct from the Oath. In Oath, you have to draw your visions. You don't know which one you're going to get, and you don't know when you're going to get it. And
you may never have one.
You may never have one, and when you get it, that's that one. Again, currently, ARCS gives everybody
you have direction.
A fate. There's something that you can try to do. You have a destiny. This thing's been called to you from the beginning of time, and like you have something you can try to do. But the other big notable thing about it is it is not necessary that you do that thing, and I think that's one of the big differences that makes, if you've played Oath, it makes the comparison understandable, because it's like, if you don't do, I'm going to say building the library, Cole's favorite, just generic example.
There are other ones.
It's only building libraries, you guys. I'm telling him he needs to come up with something else. But if you don't build the library, there's outcomes for that as well. So you could be in a game where you're supposed to build the library. I don't want to. I'm going to build up power. I'm going to let the library never exist. And now you've created a new situation going into the next game, where what happens if the library was never created? That not only affects you, it affects the other 2 people. Right,
because some of those fate cards are goals, but earlier in the game they're like toggles. Like, did you do this thing? Because if it didn't happen, it's going to unlock a different.
The revolution breaks out because you didn't stop the type of thing.
So there were some questions here. Is it possible to play different campaigns with different people from the same box? No. Your box is good for one campaign at a time. My hope is that we put enough content in it that you can play this game a lot, and that I want so one thing that's really important to me is, sometimes when you're designing, I've never designed a 50-hour campaign game, but having talked to people who have, they really think about it like a story or like a video game. So they're not really interested in replayability. They're interested in like, what is like the, I feel like when I'm playing games or working on games, we talk a lot about replayability and depth. And if we were narrative designers, or if we were working on a video game or something, we might be talking a lot more about like momentum.
Sure.
Right. Like, what's the momentum of the story? Are players still wanting to go into the next scenario? And so It's interesting, even now, as I'm designing these plot lines, I'm finding myself being like, okay, is this plot line only working because players are like excited at the new bauble? Or can this game, and what I would love to happen is, let's say the game comes with 8 plot lines, and basically 3 of them are going to be active, or as many as there are players are going to be active in the very first game, and then each of those seeds can either fail or succeed. So imagine a pool of 8, you draft 4, and then they can fail or succeed, and then that gives you a huge range of permutations for different things that can happen. And all of those plot lines have branches and other things that can go on. But it's my hope that they would be designed in such a way that even when we're testing it in studio, and we've played the game 100 times, we say like, okay, like even with full knowledge of all the different things that happen, I'm still interested in the way that when you play like FTL, and this is where I start thinking about roguelikes, right? Where like FTL has story beats, and Into the Breach has story beats, and when you play a run, you're like playing mini encounters, and you're like, okay, on this run, I want to like hit this a certain way, I'm going to hit that a different way, and as different plots, like you're not going to see everything, but you also know that like like the game doesn't lose something just because you've explored some of that path before. How the plot lines work component-wise, a lot of it's cards.
Yeah.
It's just old-fashioned paper.
Yeah.
Not super clever when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then there was another question, about schedule.
Oh, sure.
So, Ahoy is not going to be Kickstarted.
Correct.
Is the main thing. And so Ahoy will have a release like Forts. Potentially it will be linked to a convention.
I was going to compare it more to like the Beyonce album, but it's like
Yeah,
Fort 2.
no,
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I was joking.
It's going to be like
it'll just happen.
It's just going to happen.
It'll just happen.
It's
you
just
won't
gonna
know,
happen.
but one day it's just going to be
One
out.
day it'll just be there.
It'll be available for purchase.
Whereas with ARCS, what will happen is in the winter, I'll start sharing design diaries. I will start soliciting some testing, probably not as much. And then what I would really like to do, we're hoping to do the Kickstarter in like Q1, Q2, sometime in there. What I would really like to do for the Kickstarter is have a TTS like demo version, because so much of the fun of ARCS is like when it's new, like seeing all the new plot lines. And so in the past, what we've done is we've just kind of like had the game. Like Fort's TTS is just all of Fort.
Yes.
But when we did Oath's TTS originally, we only had the first 60 or 70 cards in there.
Yeah.
And so for ARCS, we might just have like 4 plot lines out of the 8, plus potentially.
And maybe they don't even finish them. Yeah. Maybe
Right. Yeah. Maybe there's just so people who are like, I want to see what this game is like, can get right into a game and can play a full cycle. And then in terms of the expandability, I saw a question about how expandable it is. It is super expandable, and it's expandable in my favorite way, which is if Patrick wanted, for instance, to take some of the campaign and setting work he did for Voidlich and build it within ARCS, what he could do is he could come up with like, this is the Return of the Voidlich expansion.
Yeah.
And if you had a copy of ARCS, you could get the expansion, and you could take the let's say it has five kind of plot lines in that expansion. You could just play with those 5 plot lines, and you could play 2, 3, 4, 5 whole campaigns of ARCS with that, just the new stuff. And then when you felt ready, you take those Generation 0 like starting fates, which are the seeds of these big plot lines, and you just shuffle them into your starting deck. In the way that if you've played a lot of Cosmic Encounter, usually when I get a new Cosmic Encounter expansion, we will spend a few games just playing with the new aliens. And then once we feel like we know them and we're comfortable using them, we mix the new aliens with our big stack of all the other aliens. And I want that kind of modularity. It's not really modularity, because modularity implies that the players are making choices. It's almost the opposite.
Yeah.
I want that kind of seamlessness.
Yeah.
So that, if this is a game that people like, and if we find that we want to keep supporting it, it's very easy to integrate all of the content into the core of the game.
And I'm going to say another thing here about narrative games. I think one of the big distinctions or huge things that I've noted about ARCS is it's not the type of narrative game, and I mean this in the most positive way, where you like, it's not like you like, go to a planet, read card 12, you found the junk planet. It's like there is a very interesting core action system that drives
it's
these
like
events. It's just because just narrative games sometimes has such a, you think of like Mansions of Madness or something,
or like Seventh Continent,
Seventh Continent. And I'm like, it's so there is still a chewy game at the core of it all, where you then need to like weaponize that game to shift towards your thing.
Yeah, and it may, like someone asked much earlier in chat, like about flavor text. It actually, like right now, it does have a tiny bit of flavor text. I think it will probably have just a tiny bit, just to like ground the players a little bit. But it's not going to be. It's not going to, it's not going to be like a brick of text. I will say, my feeling, I'm generally like anti-flavor text, but I will say Unfathomable found pretty well written, and like actually. I thought that the flavor text on Unfathomable like did a really good job and kind of changed some of my thinking about it. Okay, so we are almost at time. Are there any other final questions, or Nick, do you have any thoughts?
What else is there to talk about?
Let me check our various.
Yeah, check the other ones. One question. Only one. No, I don't know, man. There's a lot going on. I'm excited about Ahoy release idea. An idea would be...
Boat release.
What? I think they meant, like, when is it coming out?
Boat release idea. I thought you wanted, like, the release party.
Oh, sure. I'm going to have it on a yacht.
Yeah,
are there going to be metal coins? There might be metal coins for Ahoy. So that's one of the critical example of what we're figuring out is what kind of components go in this box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've only played... my initial response was, well, that's ridiculous. And then I realized I have only played Ahoy with metal coins.
There you go. So you're used to it already?
I'm used to it.
You
could even do, like, kind of smaller ones. I don't know. It depends
yeah.
on the box size.
The little doubloons, yeah.
Someone asked... Kyle asked, can ARC plot lines be combined? Yes. Yes. So you might, like... Yeah, they can be combined in all sorts of ways. There is an open question about how many plot lines a single player can be operating on. Don't know the answer to that question yet. Oh my gosh.
Patrick asking, is Patrick working on anything?
Is Patrick working on anything? Patrick's working on Dungeon Fortress, which we talked about extensively while you were in the bathroom earlier. No, Patrick's working on a 4X fantasy game called Dungeon Fortress that's pretty neat. It is currently going through some redevelopment, so there are many... I feel like a month ago I could have spoken very confidently about what Dungeon Fortress is and isn't, and right now it's just it's going through an evolution. I don't know what's going.
It's been back in the Patrick workshop, so I haven't seen it for a minute.
I haven't seen it a bit. And then favorite. Okay, this is a good question to end on. I'm going to make sure there are no other more meaningful things. What is your favorite vast role, Nick? Either one. Fearsome Foes. TMM, TCC.
Manor. I think it's the Manor. That's my favorite role. Every time we've worked on another asymmetric game, I am still surprised how the Manor's thing works.
So clean.
The fact that it works in all of that, I just always think is crazy.
Yeah, I love the Manor. My favorite one is it's either cave or spider. I'm like very split. I really like the spider. I think the spider is really interesting, especially spider versus armored knight with the javelin. It's a good dynamic.
Same Manor.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. As both Patrick and Nick know, I main Manor. Manor's my tier 1 pick. I think it's the strongest role. Unless you're playing with the goddamn Shadow Paladin.
Changes things up a bit.
Changes it up. Maybe we'll do Vast for our next game day. All right, well, we will call it there. Happy Halloween, everybody. This is our October chat, after all. October for me is like Unfathomable, Arkham card game, and Fury of Dracula. Do you have any Halloween games you're going to be playing this month?
Oh gosh, no, I'm watching What We Do in the Shadows and Over the Garden Wall.
Oh yeah,
those are my two. That's my current October stuff.
Yeah, Over the Garden Wall. It is so nice in the Twin Cities right now. It feels very summery.
Yeah. And
as soon as it gets like a step more fallish, I'm ready for Over the Garden Wall. That's so right. All right, well, everybody, please sign up to our newsletter if you aren't on it already, and we will be back in early November for our next chat, and I think I'll be with Patrick, and we'll probably be talking about Dungeon Fortress and more ARC stuff, and maybe Nick will stop by. I don't know what will happen. Well, puppets.
Yeah, I don't know. Kyle, he'll put a piece of Ahoy art up just to keep the. We'll show him what's up.
Yeah, Ahoy.
Scroll through Kyle's Twitter. He's got some.
Yeah,
it exists.
Well, and also one thing I know on is that y'all are getting a very interesting window into the back end here because ARCS. We're talking about ARCS right now because I blabbed about it on Twitter. But the actual marketing campaign, the proper one for ARCS, will start ramping up a little bit
in
later.
Earnest, yeah.
A little bit later, and then Marauder will come out.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about Marauder for a while, and then that little game Ahoy, which we've been talking about for the past couple months, will start roaring up, and we'll get everything together. So there's always it's always funny to take folks behind the marketing curtain, because it's almost like a time travel movie or something where all the timeline is jumbled.
It's all messed up, whatever they see,
All right, well, take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you all later.
Bye.